Hi, everyone. Today, it is my great honor and pleasure to have with me Professor Thornicroft, professor in community mental health in King's College London. Hello.
And thank you very much for inviting me. Good morning.
Good morning. So, I think we are going to start straight away with our first question. Given that you are a leading expert in stigma related to mental health, my first question obviously would be what contribution can early career psychiatrists play in stigma reduction?
So, the first thing to say is that I think we have to be strong advocates and base our interventions on the strongest evidence. A couple of years ago, it was my pleasure to co lead the Lancet Commission on ending stigma and discrimination in mental health. And what we found is that we're able to define stigma in four ways. First, stigma coming from members of the public. This is wrong knowledge, misinformation by members of the public. It means negative attitudes. It means discriminatory behavior. Second, self stigma by people with mental health conditions. Third, stigma against family members and against people working in mental health. And fourth, structural stigma. We know there are many, many negative impacts of stigmatization. But what can we do? Well, the evidence is now pretty clear that social contact is the way to reduce stigmatization. What does that mean? It means ways in which people who have experience of mental health conditions have contact with people who do not, either direct and in person or indirect, for example, remote or digital. So, what does this mean for early career psychiatrists? It means that you have a direct role in forming coalitions with other people, other groups to actively work against stigma, but recognizing that the key change agent is social contact with people with mental health conditions. So there's a direct role for early career psychiatrists in organizing and mobilizing and being active, and an indirect role in supporting people with experience of mental health conditions whose testimony, whose stories, whose narratives are the main driver of change.
That is very thought provoking. Moving on to my second question, what quality or competency do you think is commonly underrated or neglected by early career psychiatrists who are aiming or aspiring for leadership roles or simply for being good doctors?
Thank you for this question, Hen. So I would focus upon the question of where we work and what we do. Are we working in hospitals or in community services? Now, if we look at the big picture across the globe, about 89% of all mental health expenditure, all the money for our services, is spent in hospitals, only 11% in the community. And in low and middle income countries, it's almost an entirely hospital based care. But the evidence speaks to having a mixture or a balance between hospital and community services. In many Western European countries, for example, it's about half community, about half the money on the hospital services. So let's think about how early career psychiatrists could get involved in that transformation. This is a fundamental transformation from an old way of thinking, an asylum, a control, institutionalized way of thinking, to a much more modern approach based upon recovery of people who have periods, sometimes brief periods, experiences of mental health conditions. So I've been through this a number of times in my own country, in England. And I think what I'd underestimated is how much doctors can simply make a change. In my experience, if we are serious about making this long term fundamental reformation of our services, it has to be done in partnership with many other organizations, many other stakeholders, for example, with local people. In my experience, often you'll have objections, you'll have petitions, you'll have marches from local people against a new mental health centre unless you talk with people, explain what you want to do. Even more important is to explain why you want to develop local community based services, that this will give better access, better continuity of care than going to a remote hospital. And then you also have to make partnerships with housing departments, with social services departments, with people in the local faith communities as well. So it's a multiple stakeholder approach. And in the long term, that can produce a stable, a new pattern of care that is much better than simply having the old asylum model, which often is experienced as dehumanizing by people with mental health conditions.
May I just add, and please let me know if you agree with me, but I think that this old traditional model of asylum also contributes to stigma and discrimination related to mental health.
It's interesting. I was reading recently about, is it true that we've always had stigma in our societies? Does this go back millennia? Probably not. There's a very interesting anthropologist called Grinker, and he has researched over the last 1,000 years or so if there's evidence that stigma was strong 500 years ago or not. And he's suggesting that it's the Industrial Revolution going back, 250 years or so, which is the turning point. And at that stage, people who had a mental health condition which was disabling began to be ostracized or expelled from the mainstream of society because they were not economically productive. And that was the change, that was the starting point of certainly of institutional stigma as well as public stigma.
Yes, very good, very, very interesting. Sadly, we have to move to our third and final question, which is in this era of digitalization, and we've seen in WCP 2025 so many sessions on telepsychiatry, digital mental health, social media. What role or contribution can early career psychiatrists have in media?
So much of our training, your training, my training as a psychiatrist, is about the one person in front of you. You make the assessment, you make the diagnosis, you make the formulation, you carry out the treatment. Maybe you talk to the family if you can sometimes. It's basically one or small group interventions. But we can do more than that. We can also speak to thousands and millions of people, especially if we gain the confidence to use the media in the way that we think is effective to promote mental health. So, for example, traditionally it would be speaking to newspaper journalists, to the radio, to television, but there's so many more channels now through podcasts, through social media, through webinars and video, and so on. So, there are many, many ways to reach people. So, my idea is that perhaps some of the psychiatrists watching this video will want to become influencers. And that, I mean, some people are natural. Perhaps you're natural at this. But for many people, it's just another skill to learn. So, how do you learn it? Well, there are courses. You can pay somebody to teach you to speak and make a video and so on. But maybe that costs money. So, you can do it in small groups. So, perhaps where you work, you form a small group, or perhaps you have a network with people in different countries. And then you can actually practice doing a 1 minute talk for a TV show or for TikTok or for Snapchat. And then in your small group, you give each other feedback. You say, you say, you close your eyes, different things. Okay, then you do it again. You practice, you get feedback, you repeat, you do it again, you rehearse, you keep practicing. And that way you become fluent and confident speaking to the media. And there's so much to do to help the public understand more about mental health and about where to go and how to get help. If you or somebody in your family or somebody in your workplace needs help, just be confident about saying, you're drinking more, your sleeping is not very well, you're more irritable, perhaps you should go to see the doctor, maybe a primary healthcare doctor in the first case. Let me come with you. But actually to signpost to help people to get help. Because at the moment, the majority of people in all of our countries worldwide who need help for a mental health condition are not getting any help at all. So we can play a part, not just for the one person in front of us we're treating, but actually for larger or huge populations if we become comfortable communicating in a compelling way to the media.
Excellent. My first thought when I heard the word influencer is that it has kind of a negative connotation, which is so sad because, as you have explained so well, we early career psychiatrists can really advocate for for our patients, for people in general, for mental health. And the meaning of the word influencer is, in this sense, completely different.
Sure. It's not just selling a sports shoes or a cosmetic or something. We could actually use influencer skills for a public health good, in this case, a public mental health good.
Thank you very much for a wonderful interview that I don't think I'll ever forget. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans. It's a pleasure.